Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. Today I created a shaker card using the Leafy Frames stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. To start creating the background for my card, I first pulled out the Rose Lattice background stamp from Simon Says Stamp, and I placed that in my Misti. This is a cling rubber background stamp, which means I had to take the foam pad out of my Misti so that it'll fit in the Misti and stamp well. I stamped the background with Versamark ink onto some Bristol Smooth paper, which I prepped with a powder tool. Now, the reason that I decided to use Bristol Smooth paper is because I'm going to be doing some ink blending on this with my Distress Oxide inks. And I really like the smooth blend that you can get with Distress Oxide inks on Bristol Smooth paper. I embossed this with Alabaster white embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and you're not going to be able to see that embossing very well until I start the ink blending. But when I do start that blending, those embossed areas are going to resist the ink that I'm putting on the paper, and those areas will show up nice and white. The colors that I picked out for this background are Spun Sugar, Abandoned Coral, Festive Berries, and Aged Mahogany. As I'm blending, you can see those embossed areas start to appear, but they're not super white yet, and that's because the Distress Oxide ink is actually sitting on top of that embossing. So in order to make it nice and crisp and white, you have to take a dry cloth when you're done blending and just kind of wipe over the entire thing, and that takes up any of that extra ink that's sitting on top of the embossed areas. Once that background was done, I pulled out the Leafy Frames stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I stamped the circular frame from that set onto some vellum, which I prepped with a powder tool, with Versamark ink. I then embossed it with the Alabaster white embossing powder, and when I was heating up that powder, I made sure that my heat tool was really hot before starting, and then I only actually used the heat tool on the vellum for short periods of time to prevent warping. I fussy cut around the outside of that frame with some scissors, and then I found a circle die that fit the inside of the circle, and I die cut that out. That circle die comes from the Hero Arts Nested Infinity Circle die set, and then I took that same circle die and one that was a little bit bigger, and I cut a ring out of some Hero Arts PLUM cardstock. I used some liquid adhesive in order to adhere that ring to the front of the embossed vellum frame. To turn this piece into my shaker, I first glued a piece of acetate to the back of the frame, and then I took some doubled up foam tape and I wrapped it around the edge of that circle. I took out the background that I created earlier and I added some large clear glitter to the center of that panel, and then once I had a good amount of that glitter, I closed it up with the shaker window. I get a lot of people asking me where I got this glitter, and I'm pretty sure I got it from Michael's in the kids craft section, but honestly you could use any clear glitter or clear sequins and you'd get a similar result. Next, I used my ATG gun to adhere my shaker panel onto a piece of PLUM cardstock from Hero Arts, and that cardstock is cut to be 4.5 by 4.5, and then I adhered that to a card base, which is also 4.5 by 4.5. For the first half of my sentiment, I picked out the stamp which says Sending, and I stamped it onto some vellum with Versamark ink, and that vellum was prepped with a powder tool for embossing, and I embossed it with Alabaster white embossing powder. For the second half of my sentiment, I picked out one of the smaller stamps from this set, which says Faraway Hugs, and I stamped that with Gina K Designs Dusty Rose ink, and I stamped it onto some Neenah Solar White cardstock. Now this part here is one of the crazier things that I've ever done with card making. I decided to pop up that sending sentiment, so I added a whole ton of really tiny pieces of foam tape behind each of those letters, and then I popped it up onto my card. It was really time consuming, but it is a labor of love, and I really am happy with the way that it turned out. As you can see, I took that smaller sentiment and I cut it down into a strip, and I popped it up with some foam tape right snug underneath that larger sentiment. For the finishing touches on this card, I first went over that smaller sentiment using my Wink of Stella glitter brush, and then I took out a whole bunch of these Moonshine sequins from Simon Says Stamp, and I placed them across the card and I glued them down using my Gina K Designs Connect glue. Here's a closer look at the finished card. I'm really happy with the way that this one turned out. I especially love all of those vellum details. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you also enjoyed this card featuring that Leafy Frames stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I do have links below for all of the supplies that I used for today's card, and remember that anytime you use one of those links, you are helping to support this channel at no extra cost to you. If you enjoyed watching today, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you want to see my future videos. I come out with new videos every single week. Again, I wanted to thank all of you for watching. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a good day.